All right, hello everyone. Wow, there's three of you that just popped up that quickly. All right, I'm gonna play my little intro. Well, first of all, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm gonna play my little intro here. Since I am cammed up for this one, I'm gonna play my last intro. I need to create another one. There's 100 things that I need to do, but I'm gonna play the intro. And then on the other side of it, I'm going to go ahead and jump in because I want to. Um, yeah, I don't want to be on for 3 hours. It's my day off, though it is a day of service. And arguably, I think I'm going to add some value to the universe with this. But I just intend for this to be a short stream. So I'll see you on the other side. Hey guys, so that was my last intro. Things are always changing and evolving. I realized that might have been kind of long. Um, and that's on the pile of things to do is to create another intro and another trailer. So excuse me. I hope you enjoyed that jazz music. That was called the Bass Walker. And as that was playing, I was realizing that I didn't put the attribution in the description box below. YouTube doesn't do something um, in terms of punishment for that, but I'll put that in after I get finished here. So, hey, everybody, Happy New Year. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Yusuf Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, the original channel. First of all, please like this stream. If you're watching it live, if you're watching on the playback, please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. I don't know how many um, folks I'm going to get for this one. Um, my super chat is live. If you come through and you want to say something, I'm going to drop my Cash App and PayPal in there now in case anyone wants to donate anything to the channel um, as I'm going through this. So, guys, I have a what this stream is about. Well, today is Dr. King Day. It's January 17th, and it's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, which is a national holiday. I believe it's now celebrated in every state. For a while, I think Arizona was the one state that didn't want to participate in Dr. King Day. I think Ronald Reagan it was either Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush who signed it into law that this should be a national holiday. But it's also considered a quote unquote day of service. So it's not intended to be a day for us to just kick back and do nothing. But I think with the stream, I'm gonna ask some questions and I'm gonna introduce some ideas which I think will benefit people. Um, some politicians are mentioned in this essay I'm going to read, but this is not to disparage anyone. It's not to disparage President Biden, Vice President Harris, former President Trump, or former President Obama. This is just I want to deal in the ideas and thinking, and I'm thinking about a saying I read in a book about wealth building, and it said that small minds talk about people, medium-sized minds talk about current events, and large minds talk about the ideas. So I want to dwell in the ideas. So as you know, I came to YouTube as a writer, and going forward, I want to sell myself as that writer, author, thinker, speaker, scientist. Da, 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 da. Um, So I'm going to read something that I wrote today. This is a thought piece on voting and economics, though it happens to involve Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Dr. Claude Anderson. Speaking of selling myself as a writer, quote unquote, as I've um, been saying probably in the last quarter of 2021, I'm working on a book project. And as a matter of fact, I have another promotional essay um, in draft right now that I'm about to publish. The link is in the description box below. That's it. The Engineers a Western New York basketball story. So I'm working on this right now, trying to push this through to completion. So if you want to read about that, that's below. Also, I am starting a newsletter. Some of you have already joined, which I appreciate. I think I'm at 9 names now. I'd like to get 11. No, I'd like to get 20 names before I send the thing out. But I want to start sending this out at the end of this month. So this is the newsletter here for the Big Words LLC. This is for me as a content creator, both on YouTube and in print because I have two blogs. And the subscribe button is right there at the bottom. You just click that, enter your email address, and boom, you'll be a part of it. And I promise that your information will not be abused or sold to a third party. So with that out of the way, um, let me jump into this so I can jump off. So I wrote this essay about 2 years ago, and I think it applies. It's a relevant discussion dating back from the civil rights era up until now. Um, Over Christmas, I was having a discussion with my mother, one of many discussions about voting. My mom, I'm from Buffalo, you all know that. And one of the things that always comes up around the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, is Buffalo politics. And the current mayor is Byron Brown. He's a black man. And Byron has detractors and he has supporters. And my mother is in the detractor pool. And the conversation comes up that he never does anything for black people in the city. And I express to her the viewpoint that politicians are beholden, is it beholden or beholden? But they will serve those who funded their campaigns first. That's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I tried to communicate to her. So you can vote for somebody. This is my opinion. You can vote for someone. Um, they're going to present an agenda, but at the end of the day, they are usually going to serve the ones who funded their campaigns and the ones who got them there. The voting is just one part of it, but the economics are another significant part of it. And right now in our country, we're going through the whole the Voting Rights Act thing. I'm not getting into that. I'm not touching that. But the question is, I think this is a very, very important thing for people to think about. Um, is my vote by itself effective in terms of policy, or is it the economics, or is it both of them together? Okay. And one of the things I was trying to tell my mother was to get the change you want and to impact the process the way you want to. It's about getting an ownership position. You have to secure an ownership position somehow. So that's kind of the backdrop for this essay. So let me bring it up right now. I'm going to read through it. It's not one of my longer ones, but I think it's an important thought piece nonetheless. And this stream is a thought piece, just to get you to think. And as I read this, I consider myself to be an independent. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an independent and a thinker, and I tend to vote my interests. So now I tend to think about when I see a particular candidate, and I'm pretty bad about the state elections and the local elections. Shout out to Herbert Lewis. He says that we need to pay more attention to those. But in general, I'm going to look at what the candidate is offering, and go from there. Though likability, I don't know if I put it in this particular writing, but I realized that likability is important as well. And that's why when you have the primaries, if you watch the major news outlets, they talk about whether or not the candidate is likable, because a lot of people vote for candidates based upon whether or not they like them. So this essay reads as follows. And I wrote this 2 years ago, right around this time. Man, time is flying. January 25th, 2020 is when I published this on the Big Words blog site. It's called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Final Vision and Dr. Claude Anderson's Prophecies. Hey, really, Chris, how are you? Thank you for stopping through. Okay. So this is a quote from inside this essay. This is from Dr. Claude Anderson. I didn't write this. So in this essay, again, this is not to disparage any politician. I feel like when I read this, I wrote this more as an objective observer. I was observing things. I was sitting on the fence and watching things happen. So keep that in mind as I read through this. So this is Dr. Claude Anderson. He says, in a race-based society, it's what you own and control that determines your opportunities, rights, and privileges. This doesn't have a darn thing to do with civil rights. That's a waste of time. It doesn't have anything to do with voting. And that goes against what the majority of us were taught. The majority of us were taught were vote, have your voice be told, have your voice be heard at the polls. In this last election cycle, get your booty to the polls. What Dr. Claude Anderson is saying, no, it's economics. And as I want you guys to decide, I don't want to tell you guys what to think. I want to encourage thinking, but you all decide for yourselves. Okay, this image of Dr. King this graphic design was created by my cousin, Tamara Coleman. Shout out to Tamara Coleman. My brother, who's also an artist. Art is subjective. So 100 people could look at one thing and see 100 different things. My brother looked at this. Me and Tamara, we talked about this. I said, this is what I want. This is what I'm envisioning for this piece. It's about Dr. King's vision of leading his people into a burning house. She overlaid it over a burning house. I liked it. I approved it. I paid her for her services. My brother said recently that image looks like it's Dr. King burning in hell. But you guys in the chat, if you're watching this, let me know what you think about that image. This was, again, about Dr. King in the burning house. My brother looked at it and saw something else. Let me know what you guys think in the chat, because art is subjective. Okay, here we go. Then this quote reads, "I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house." Before I start this piece, I want to acknowledge the creator of its primary image. It was generated by Creative Designs by the very talented Tamara Coleman. If you want to learn more about Tamara and her work, contact her by email at tammycole@hotmail. This is all below in the description box, by the way. This Black History blog post falls under my principles of critical thought and financial literacy/money. Here on my blog and on my YouTube channel, Big Discussions 76, I challenge readers and viewers to question things and not just accept the images and messages presented to them. This is particularly important for this election year, where we voters are sure to be slammed with all kinds of propaganda and biased reporting by the mainstream news sources. So this was January 25th, 2020. So this was 2 years ago. So we were just going into the Democratic primary. This was before the historic 2020 general election. And it wasn't quite clear who the Democratic candidate was going to be to run against then President Donald Trump, or as some referred to him as number 45. So this was right around that time. This was pre-COVID. This was before the pandemic really took root and locked our country down 2 months later. So that's where we were when I wrote this. One of the interesting things about history is that he or she who controls the narrative controls the minds and the perceptions of the masses regarding what happened for a given person or event. Some argue that all the technology we have today has made the world worse, and there are cases where that's true. I usually counter with the sentiment by arguing that in some ways it has made it better. One way it has made the world better is through the ability to share information so that more accurate and complete stories can be told. When we think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we often think back to his historic I Had a Dream speech, his philosophy of nonviolence, the marches, his time spent in jail, and then his tragic assassination. But there was so much more to the legendary face of the civil rights movement. In my 2019 blog post entitled, "Whose Job Is It to Teach Black History?" I discussed Dr. Michael Eric Dyson's revelation that Dr. King had extramarital affairs and why I thought it was important to know about them, something also depicted in the movie Selma. So I pondered that before this live stream, and I don't know what Dr. Dyson's. I think when I wrote that I was happy to hear about that, it just meant that just to know that um, um, when we lionize people, especially clergy people, we don't acknowledge them as real people. And I think where I was coming from with that was it was good to know that someone we put it so high up has faults and is human as well. That's where I was coming from with that. I wasn't saying it was a good thing to besmirch or disparage Dr. King, but just it was good to know that he was a real person. And because oftentimes our icons, our celebrities, our entertainers, our politicians, when we find out that they're real people, for some people are crushed. But now knowing what we know about what the FBI was doing back then to our black leaders, it makes you wonder if even those reports about Dr. King were real. So, but I do believe in telling a complete story, and I do believe in completeness history. If you're coming in, please hit the like button. Jay Bones is here, so let me acknowledge really Chris and excuse me, Jay Bones. Jay Bones, thank you for supporting my content throughout this weekend. You were over at the science stream yesterday. So, guys, this very much, I think, dovetails to yesterday's science stream. We were talking about technology, we were talking about business, we were talking about economics. All these things go together. The super chat is live. If you guys want to super chat, that's there. My cash app and PayPal are here as well. Jay Bones, thank you for the 99-cent super sticker. Every little bit adds up. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, let's see. Another revelation for me regarding Dr. King was my mentor sharing that just as many Black people wanted to take his life as white people, if not more. It's odd and unsettling to think something like that could happen, but information and perspectives that are being shared now may give insight as to why. Something that classically hasn't gotten as much exposure, but which is now gaining traction in certain circles today, is Dr. King's final thoughts on his life's work. So, my mentor, who is a boomer, shared with me during a mentoring session that during that time, there were Black people who did not agree with Dr. King's positions. And there were just as many Black people who wanted to take his life as white people. For me, it was strange to hear. It was startling, but but only someone who lived during that time would know that. I'm a mid 70s baby, a Gen Xer. Um, Much of what I heard about Dr. King growing up was the "I Have a Dream" speech, his visions of white children and Black children holding hands, desegregation. It was a very, very rosy picture of him. But in recent years, it's been coming out through numerous sources what he was working on and what he was focused on when he was assassinated, and that gives insight as to why he was assassinated. And it turns out that he was focused on economics. He was focused on going to Washington to get our check, quote unquote. And that's very, very important when you think about where things are now and where things were then, and what's happening now. That's very, very important to think about. In terms of his assassination, um, a couple of years ago, please hit the like button if you're coming in. In terms of his assassination, a couple of years ago, we did take a family trip to Memphis, and we did go to the Lorraine Motel Memorial. Me and my family, and they did have passages about his life, and um, one really riveting passage was on his last day and what he did on his last day before he got assassinated. I'm sure all of you have seen the picture of him laying there on the balcony with, I think, Jesse and another gentleman, might have been Bayard Rustin, you know, pointing over his dead body. Judge Joe Brown, in an interview with Kwame Brown, I think it was, gave a very, very um, morbid account of who probably assassinated him. Judge Joe Brown was of the opinion that it was um, uh, that our government was behind it. I'll just say that, but also it was special. It was two snipers. So these were highly trained sharpshooters, not James Earl Ray. And Judge Joe Brown gave an account of that and said and gave us an account of where the bullet entered and where the bullet traveled in his body. As he was dying, and it was very, 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 very grisly, and it was very, very sad uh, that he was shot, but also to know that he died in that way. So if you that's on YouTube, I think it was probably on Kwame Brown's channel, but it's a very, very disturbing account of how he actually died, what and who did it, and from a medical standpoint. Okay, Dr. King's signature victory was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it turns out that before his death, he wondered if he'd spent his life fighting for the wrong things. He pondered if he'd led his people in the wrong direction, as discussed in the opening quote of this blog post. This is a good place to ask an important question. what exactly happened in 1968 that warranted Dr. King's assassination as opposed to one of the previous years. A prevalent theory is that Dr. King's focus had shifted from social integration and desegregation to economic and financial equality slash power and empowerment. His final effort was, in fact, the Poor People's Campaign. And on some other channels, actually, there's footage of him talking about we're going to Washington to get our check, and there's footage of him talking about um, his displeasure or regret about how um, all the civil rights efforts had turned out 4 years later. So he was retrospective. He was looking back at what had happened years later, and he was wondering, okay, did we do the right thing? Our efforts, have they bore the proper fruit? And he was starting to ask questions about economics and what else needed to be done going forward besides the Civil Rights Act of and the Voting Rights Act of the early 1960s. And this was not talked about during my youth. I'm just finding this stuff out. I'm finding out about this stuff in the last 5 years because of platforms like YouTube. So here's Dr. Claude Anderson's quote again. In a race-based society, it's what you own and control that determines your opportunities, rights, and privileges. This doesn't have a darn thing to do with civil rights. That's a waste of time. It doesn't have anything to do with voting. At this point, I want to introduce Dr. Claude Anderson, and then I'm going to bring the two men together at the conclusion of this piece. For those unfamiliar with him, Dr. Claude Anderson is an author slash economist slash historian and a former cabinet member of President Jimmy Carter. For 40 plus years of my life, I was unaware of Dr. Anderson, and I only became aware of him due to the vigilance. Some of you guys are going to laugh at this. I see BGS in there. Of the vigilance of Dr. Boyce Watkins, who I watch regularly on YouTube and who I also found on Twitter. This in part underscores the good of our new technologies. It underscores the good our new technologies have done. So this was 2 years ago. I check in on Boyce sometimes to see what he's talking about, but I don't agree with everything Boyce says, as I'll describe. But I'm very grateful to him for introducing Dr. Claude Anderson because he was in the Carter administration, and there was no talk in my social and church circles, my home circle, all those years growing up in Buffalo, I never heard the name Dr. Claude Anderson. I'm about to tell you another place where I never heard of Dr. Claude Anderson or other intellectuals and economists. Dr. Watkins is unapologetically Black, a staunch advocate of Black love. I know some of you guys are laughing at that. Is considered controversial by some. And while he regularly weighs in on some of the social issues of the day, at that time he was attacking Lizzo, or he was deliberating over Lizzo. His background is in economics, money, and investing. His core messages are thus about Black people learning how to invest and build businesses. He's very, very passionate about Black kids learning to buy stock and build businesses as early as possible. And he has programs for teaching such skills to both children and adults. He argues that this is more important than our kids learning to do the latest dances or excelling at football or basketball. Okay, so sometimes he does weigh in on social topics, with varying levels of success and um, positive reaction. But I do like his financial messages and messaging. Um, I want to acknowledge Art Newstall in the chat. I want to acknowledge Jay Bones. I want to acknowledge the master teacher BGS as well for being here and listening to this. But that's an important thought piece there as well. A lot of our kids, they know how to do the latest dances, but what do they know about stocks and building businesses and money? So I think that's an important contribution from voice. I don't recall when Dr. Watkins started bringing Dr. Claude Anderson onto his show, but once he did, it was easy to see why and why he looks upon Dr. Anderson with such reverence. I'd encourage any readers to look up any of Dr. Anderson's discussions with Dr. Watkins and then any of Dr. Anderson's abundance of interviews available on YouTube. He had a powerful discussion with the popular Breakfast Club. And over the holiday season, I stumbled upon an interview of Dr. Anderson from 1995 in Detroit. He had another powerful interview with Rock Newman here in DC. I'd embed these interviews right here into my blog post, but I don't want any kind of copyright infringement claims against me. I'll just share the links to the interviews. So I shared interviews. I could probably share these without getting a copyright strike on my blog or anything, but um, I shared the links to his discussion on the Breakfast Club, which I talk about a little bit in this blog post. I shared his Rock Newman interview and also the Detroit interview as well. What's remarkable about the 1995 interview was that Dr. Anderson spoke on everything that's unfolding today. One point was the efforts to bring immigrants into the United States to undermine the Black vote, and I'll leave that there. Okay, you can, if you're curious, you can watch the interview yourself. But this stream is about economics and voting. It's a very polarizing topic, as ironically, many Black people support the same politicians who are looking to enforce these policies. The year of 1995 was just prior to the internet becoming mainstream. Interestingly, even when transferring to my historically Black college, I don't remember any mention of Dr. Anderson, which is very strange. As noted before, the same is true for intellectuals like Dr. Thomas Sowell and Dr. Walter E. Williams, Black conservatives, but intellectual heavyweights nonetheless. And I'm going to acknowledge not everybody likes Dr. Thomas Sowell. Not everybody likes Dr. Walter E. Williams. I know BGS is not a fan of Dr. Thomas Sowell, but I think it's important to at least listen to the ideas. Listen to the ideas in terms of how economics impact public policy and how public policy impacts quality of life. I think it's just important, regardless of whether or not you like the person or you think their ideas are valid, or whether you think their backgrounds are valid. I think it's important to listen to the ideas. And it's fascinating being at a HBCU. There was very little discussion, to my knowledge, of these people. Then again, it's not strange, as Dr. Anderson discussed, how the individuals who decide which books will be used at HBCUs don't want his books there during his interview with the Breakfast Club. While I recommend 3 of Dr. Anderson's interviews above, and while I'm going to recommend his books below, in watching and reading Dr. Anderson's content, I must warn you, if you're a Barack Obama enthusiast who was in love with the symbolism of his presidency, or even a staunch Democrat, his words aren't kind to either. He's not a pro-Trumper by any means, but he's very open about the political class's role in the state of Black America right now. By the way, many criticisms of Barack Obama's legacy are emerging within the Black community these days, and can at least be, and this can at least in part be attributed to what happened to Senator Kamala Harris in the Democratic primary. Then Senator Kamala Harris, now Vice President Kamala Harris. So again, when I wrote this as kind of an observer watching what was going on, not necessarily weighing in and saying Senator Harris was bad. Though I did create a humorous video on Chucks and Pearls shortly after the last election. But again, just an objective observer. There was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of questioning around that time of the primary of what President Obama had done for Black people and what um, at that time candidate Harris intended to do for Black people. Those discussions were like, if you had to be um, asleep not to hear those discussions. And but if you weren't on Twitter and if you weren't on YouTube, you probably didn't hear them because CNN and MSNBC weren't covering that. They just weren't covering that. Let me take a swig of my water here. When you read, your voice dries out. And my voice is finally starting to feel normal again from my positive COVID um, test. And this is almost done, guys. With the videos I've listed, you can go watch and learn for yourself. For the sake of this post, I'm just going to focus on three things. The first is Dr. Anderson's plan for empowering Black communities across the United States, much of which can be done by the communities themselves without outside help. And that's up for debate. You know, do we have enough uh, economic power within our own community to build things, or do we need outside help? That's, not everybody's going to agree on that. He described the following points with hosts DJ Envy and Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club. He described Black economic empowerment by the Black community itself as building a proverbial building with multiple floors. The first floor, which may be the hardest floor, build a community and practice group economics. This is talked about during Kwanzaa every year. Group economics, supporting each other, particularly making the money bounce in the community 8 to 12 times before it leaves. I'm going to discuss that below. The second floor, politics. Without economics, there's no ability to influence politicians or elections as a group. Voting is immaterial and a game of entertainment. You buy or rent the politicians. This is on the Breakfast Club interview. You can look it up. I didn't think of this myself. But it begs the question, who are politicians beholden to? We know that certain images and symbols will win certain voters over, but once they get into office, whichever office it is, are they going to do things because it's the right thing to do? Are they going to do things because of good moral character, high moral character, or are they going to do things for the people who funded their campaigns? Growing up, there was no discussion of that. There was no discussion of that at my HBCU. The third floor, use the politicians to influence the court systems and law enforcement to decrease things like police brutality. The fourth floor, media. If you don't own the media, you can't organize, communicate, or motivate. But also, as I described, the media, the people who create the images and the messaging, they have a lot of power because they can drive how we think, and they can drive, they can impact which way you go, and they can impact how you're seeing things. So the media has a lot of power. They have a lot of power. They can market things to you. They can make you think this person is good or this person is evil. They can cover things up. They can say, look over here, look, do this, do this, do this. Don't pay so much attention to this, which is what I was getting at with the whole Dr. King thing. Most of his imaging growing up was the "I have a dream" speech. Nothing about we're going to get our check. Nothing about the economics. None of that. It was most of the messaging about him growing up was the "I have a dream" speech and civil rights and um, uh, the time spent in the jail. Nothing about economics. So likewise, people who get that messaging, they're not going to be thinking about economics, and they're not going to make that connection for themselves as to why that's important. So the fifth floor, this is interesting because um, most of us were encouraged to go get our educations first. Okay. But Dr. Claude Anderson has it fifth, education. Interestingly, the final level, but according to his logic, it makes sense, as there would theoretically be the existence of Black businesses for our young professionals to go work in. Right now, it's go get your education and go work for someone else. This is my father's mentality. Um, keep that job and work it until you die. Um, no discussion of build an enterprise for yourself. Um, but I understand my father's logic. He was an employee, and it's security. Go get that job, keep it, have a secure life. Um, so that's a decision everyone has to make for themselves. But as we're hearing, if you listen to financial talks and streams, uh, you can't pass that on. So Damon Dash, the Breakfast Club interviewed Damon Dash. I'm sure they um, interviewed him several times, but Damon Dash said some very, very riveting things about not having a boss and not being able to pass a job on. I'm going to leave that there and I'm going to move on. I don't want to prolong this. The second point I want to focus on is that of Black people relearning how to bounce their dollars in the Black community as described above. In this context, bouncing simply refers to spending money within the community to give those um, there the opportunity to benefit from it long term. Dr. Anderson argues eloquently that all the other races and ethnic groups, that of all the other races and ethnic groups, the Black dollar bounces the least within its own community before quickly leaving. In the Black History related piece following this one, I'm going to discuss whether racial desegregation irreversibly started the process of destroying Black businesses. Maybe I'll present that during Black History Month. An example of supporting Black business is patronizing the above mentioned Tamar Coleman, who created the primary image of this piece. My final point regarding Dr. Anderson is that of reparations, which is basically the reconciling of the debt and economic disparities um, by the United States believed to be owed to the descendants of slaves by the chattel slavery and Jim Crow, created by chattel slavery and Jim Crow. I'm sorry. Sometimes when you're reading things, things come out jumbled, even if it's written in a logical way. I'm not going to argue whether Black people should get them here, though it is interesting that groups like Japanese Americans got something following World War II. I didn't know that until I visited one of the museums here in DC, that Japanese Americans did, in fact, get something from the government after World War II because they were put in those camps. So they got something. Other groups apparently got similar severances. I'll just say that Dr. Anderson is a staunch advocate of reparations, and don't be surprised to see a further fractured Black vote in the 2020 general election due to this one issue, which was in large part brought to the forefront by the Obama presidency. So I don't know historically. So guys, thank you for those coming in. Please hit the like. The super chat is live. You can donate to my Cash App and PayPal as well. Those are here. Um, I don't know how it started. It might have been just by virtue of President Obama being Black, but the calls for reparations definitely ramped up during his presidency and afterwards. And me personally, this might piss some people off. I'm not sitting around waiting for reparations from the government. My mindset is take what I have and start to build things for myself. But that was a very, very significant piece during the Obama presidency after the Obama presidency, and then leading into the last election cycle. And Dr. King talked about that as well. And he acknowledged that it would take billions and billions of dollars to set right the after effects of chattel slavery and Jim Crow. So this is all a very big thing. Jay Bones, thank you for playing Hype Man there in the chat. I appreciate that. Pretty much at the end here, I'd encourage readers to purchase copies of Dr. Anderson's books, which it seems are not available at HBCUs as described above. I asked for and received Dr. Anderson's 3 books last year for Christmas: Powernomics, The Black History Reader, and Black Labor, White Wealth. Again, he has in large part been kept out of mainstream media, and based upon his messages, it's not surprising why. I would also encourage readers to visit Dr. Anderson's Harvest Institute to learn more about his efforts, and to make a donation if you're motivated to do so. So that's the book cover for Powernomics. I have to admit, guys, I'm not finished. I'm about halfway through. It's hard to keep up with when you have multiple books. It's hard to be BGS. I don't know if he's out there, but um, unless you have large blocks of time to sit down and read, it's hard to read and finish everything. So that's Powernomics. So what does all this have to do with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Well, it relates directly to his vision of the burning house. Were his efforts in large part directed in the wrong direction? Was it always economics? Were economics always the key? Did desegregation ultimately have harmful effects on Black America, causing all our Black businesses to wither away and die? Also, have we become a permanent underclass as described by Dr. Claude Anderson? Now, you could see why these questions, you could see why you could see why putting these questions out in the open would be problematic um, for certain parties. I'll just say that. This is the thought piece. I'm not saying this person's bad, this person's bad. This is just a thought piece, but I could see why getting these questions out there on a large scale would cause a lot of problems. In terms of reparations, based upon responses by then Democratic candidate Senator Kamala Harris and the remaining candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, I'm not going to hold my breath for them. Part of Dr. Claude Anderson's gospel regarding economic empowerment, though, is hopeful and suggests that Black people as a group can still coalesce and build something. But the question is, will we? Okay, so again, as I said at the beginning, this was not to disparage any of these politicians, but if you go back and take a look at the debates and when these people were interviewed, the reparations question kept coming up, and they all kind of had to dance around it a little bit or just come out and say, no, I'm not doing anything for one group, but here's this plan for the entire United States. So I personally think whatever plan is presented, it's important to kind of take a look and see what's going on, figure out how you could prosper in that plan. But this is a part of history. They were all confronted with this, and it's an uncomfortable conversation for presidential candidates to talk about out in the open in front of everybody. It just is what it is. And I imagine it's hard for them to take a solid position on it out in the open, because then they'd have to say, okay, well, we're going to do something specific for Black people. And then there'd be a lot of people angry at them for saying that they would do something specific for Black people. So it's almost like a no-win situation, in my opinion. It would require a mass shift in mindset, which is the hardest part. If you watch Dr. Boyce Watkins' content, he's shared frustrations numerous times about Black people as a group not being interested in learning about economics and financial literacy. I can personally attest to that as well. I've written about it. When I first started this blogging platform, I wrote a lot of financial pieces. They didn't always get a lot of traction because I think it's just something people aren't interested in. I think by nature, only a small segment of people care about the minutia of money and how it works and how to grow it. The rest of the people don't really care. And an acquaintance at the time, another PhD, she said to me when she first saw my blog, "Who's his audience? Who's he writing this for?" I was writing it for financially minded people, people who care about the minutia and people care about what a matching contribution is, people who care about what the law of compounding interest are, people who care about setting up emergency funds. I was writing to those people and people who realized they didn't know much, but they needed to know more. But again, there are people who just are not interested in that. And I think that in large part, that at least partially explains what we see in society as well. But that's a different subject for a different day. Let me finish this up because I'm going on an hour. Some are, but personally, I thought it was odd that it took something like Jay-Z's 444 album to get Black people talking about these topics, at least for a little while. Again, some of us are interested in this stuff and actively talk about it and study it, but the majority isn't. A small group will thus likely thrive, while the majority may not as much. If you watched social media after Jay-Z dropped his 444 album, people were talking about, oh, I need to learn how to invest. I need to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to do this. And then I think that talk kind of died down a little bit. So I thought it was kind of odd that it took a rapper for people to get excited about that. And that's kind of disturbing in a way, um, if you think about it. But it also says that as a people, we take our cues from entertainers, athletes, and politicians, and not necessarily thought leaders. So that's important. It took Jay-Z for people to start thinking about those types of things, at least for a little while. So this is the ending, guys. If money, financial literacy, and business topics fascinate you, I have a wealth of content on that right now here on the Big Words blog site. As a matter of fact, my blogging platform was rated one of the 10 best financial blogs by the company Expertito in 2019. I've written several literary pieces about some basics of budgeting and topics regarding things like matching contributions. My pieces are usually personal stories discussing my journey learning these concepts. Working with a collaborator, I've published profuse amounts of content in the areas of financial literacy and money and business and entrepreneurship. These are smaller informational pieces you can read through in 5 minutes or less. I just go to the categories tab on my platform and choose one of those categories. I also discuss money topics on my YouTube channel entitled Big Discussion 76. That's here right now. We're here right now. Please stop by, subscribe, and find the playlist entitled Big Discussions Financial Literacy. As Black History Month approaches, I'll be publishing another piece specifically focusing on whether civil rights and desegregation hurt Black America ultimately. Thank you for reading this piece. I want to thank Dr. Boyce Watkins for his hard work in trying to get his money messages out to our people and for getting Dr. Claude Anderson out into the spotlight where he always belonged. Again, for 40 years of my life, I had no idea who he was, and I'm not alone. That's a major problem. But if you understand economics and media as I do now, it's not unexpected. All right. So guys, that's it. Jay Bones, I appreciate your support. You know what? I'll drop the link, Jay Bones, if you want to come up and say a few words about this. You can come up. I think you're a money business guy yourself. But again, none of this. I mentioned a couple politicians in here. None of this was to disparage any of them. This was a thought piece. The stream is a thought piece. But think about messaging. Think about um, the role the media plays. Think about if voting by itself is the be all and the end all. Think about how much more control you may or may not have if you can economically back a candidate and control the agenda. That's what this piece is about. And also, since it's Dr. King Day, and there are content creators creating videos right now, two of the big ones from the B1 sector created two big ones about what Dr. King was looking at when he got assassinated. Um, he was looking at economics. He was thinking about money. He was thinking about economic empowerment, and they weren't pushing for that at the beginning of the civil rights movement. But I think he eventually worked his way around to saying this is where it's at. This is this is where we need to focus. This is where the country needs to um, make things right in terms of our people. It's the economics. So that's what this is about. Jay Bone says, I know how you feel, man. I know how you feel. A week and a half ago, I couldn't do this whole thing because my voice was feeling my throat was feeling kind of janky. He says, my voice has been completely dismantled by COVID, Dr. Dunbar, but I appreciate it. Your insight and your hard work. Please keep up the great work. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm going to read my, well, I'll show it to you guys right now. I'm not going to read it today, but it's funny. Dr. King Day is usually in the middle of January, and then you have this 2 weeks before Black History Month, which, as they say, is the shortest month of the year. So we got the shortest month of the year, but you have a nice month and a half in terms of content to really hit Black history topics. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Um, let me see. See if let me see if it's on the front page. Yeah. So guys, once again, I don't have well, I do have a super chat here. The super chat is live. If you want to make a donation by Cash App or PayPal. Oh, that's the StreamYard link. $1, $2, whatever. It all helps. And also we had a good build, me and Complex Design over on my science channel yesterday about technology and business. In my mind, all this goes together. We're underrepresented in the STEMs, especially in the technology fields. That's where things are going. And there's a lot of room for empowerment over in the tech sector and in the STEMs. So all of this goes together, getting these messages out to young people, reading, STEM, all that, economic empowerment, financial literacy, all of this rolls together in my mind. So let me see if I can find that. Let's see, general education. I have to update the cover page. Let's see. See if Black business comes up in my search engine. Yeah, here it is. Let me do my screen share. And it makes sense. Um, in terms of Dr. Claude Anderson's points, again, it makes sense to me. Getting those questions out in the open, um, giving him more airtime on a large scale, that would present a host of problems for the status quo. So BGS, thank you very much for the super sticker. I want to encourage thinking on this channel. When I think of thinking, I think of BGS. He's an encyclopedia of information himself. And thinking doesn't necessarily involve supporting the ideas of everybody. I know BGS has been outspoken about not being a fan of Dr. Thomas Sowell. But I think just being able to understand some of the ideas and toss some of those ideas back and forth in your mind, even if you don't agree with the ideas, I think that's important. So yeah, so this piece right here, I'll probably do another stream on this. Did social integration kill Black American businesses? And this is one of Dr. Claude Anderson's quotes right here. We swear white ice is colder. But this question was presented to me 20, 30 years ago back in Buffalo by a Black business owner who stated that in a certain section of our city, Jefferson Avenue, there were Black businesses all up and down that street. But after social integration, those businesses slowly withered away and died because we could go to the white businesses now. We could yeah, we could go get on, we could go support those businesses, we can go participate in those businesses. So why should we stay in our businesses if we can go support and patronize those other businesses? So I'm going to look out for this one maybe later this week or in a week or so. So, well, guys, it's just over an hour. I just wanted to read this essay. It's Dr. King Day. This is my contribution to Dr. King Day. It's a thought piece. I think it's something that we need to think about, not just in the YouTube space, but also um, out in the quote unquote real world. Um, but I don't think these ideas are necessarily welcome out there. And I'm going to end by going back to, since I went to an HBCU, it if what Dr. Anderson says is true, then there's a group of people, a board determining. Shout out to JCSU. If what he says is true, then yes, there's a board determining which books are going to go onto those campuses. Howard, Morehouse, Hampton, Johnson C. Smith, Spelman. So that means that these people don't want those messages going onto those campuses. Why? Well, you in the audience, you decide. So, guys, I'm going to stop this here. Enjoy the rest of your Dr. King Day, but also try to put the complete picture out there. Talk about what he was thinking about when he was assassinated, and talk about where his focus had turned when he was assassinated, and talk about why it was dangerous for him to focus in that direction. Tell the complete story, because in our society right now, we don't always get the complete stories of things. We get half truths, and we get finely crafted images and messages for the masses to consume. So, all right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Please like, share, and subscribe. And one other thing, please consider subscribing and joining the Big Words LLC newsletter. The link is in the description box below. There's a subscribe button there at the bottom. You just put your email address in. You have my promise that your info will not be abused or sold to a third party, but it's just a more strategic way for getting my messaging out as a writer and a YouTube content creator. So with that, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching on the playback and you want to donate to my Cash App or PayPal, that information is below. Everyone be safe out there. J Bones, I hope your throat is feeling better. Mine is just starting to feel normal again right now. Um, let's see, extended clips just dropped in my original blog, my first blog. I'm gonna share my writer's blog, which is more for more literary writing and storytelling. And there are promotional essays for my book project over there. So there's Big Words Are Powerful, and there's Big Words Authors. Big Words Authors is right there. So, all right, everyone, please like, share, and subscribe. Let me slow down. Everyone, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye bye.